I'd like to especially thank Professor Roden, Matt Ferguson, and Father Trinity for being part of my spiritual journey. I invite you to accompany me on a reflection about how our different journeys as people of faith, students, parents, partners, children, and members of society are integrated. Specifically, I'd like to share how my experience as an immigrant is inextricably connected to my spiritual journey. Those connections were not always clear to me, and the path to St. Andrews, to college, to an integrated life was uncertain. However, I always kept in mind a passage from Mark 11:24, where Jesus tells his disciples, "Therefore I say unto you, what things soever ye desire, when ye pray, believe that ye receive them, and ye shall have them." Uncertainty has defined my life, but Jesus Christ's message here tells us that where there is uncertainty, there can also be faith. I grew up in a small town in Honduras with my grandmother, going to church 7 days a week, twice on Sundays. But don't worry, we will not be meeting here later today. Even though I was in the house of the Lord every day and constantly in Bible-oriented conversations with older women, sorry grandma if you're watching, drinking coffee, I never felt the presence of God. I wanted to cry like other adults did in church. I wanted to understand the scriptures. I wanted to feel a connection. But this never happened, so I grew up thinking that there was something wrong with me and that God had abandoned me. On the contrary, during that time, God had big plans that I am only now beginning to comprehend. It would take a trip across 3 countries to restore my faith and connect with God. In 2008, when I was 10 years old, my mother, who's here today, was able to bring me to the United States. On the trip, I was accompanied by 3 other children. As we crossed Mexico by car, with the cliffs overlooking the Pacific Ocean to our left side, we turned to God and asked for his protection and to deliver us safely to our parents in the United States. Each night we kneeled and prayed together. For the first time, I felt the presence of God, not in loneliness, but in community. Indeed, the scriptures tell us in Matthew 18:20, "For where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there I am in the midst of them." After a month of travel, we made it to the United States and reunited with our parents. Immediately, I joined a church, but it was a return to the routine I had in Honduras. The end of the journey to the United States had marked the end of my spiritual journey, or at least a long pause. For the next few years, I felt more removed from God's presence than ever before, and in 2015, I left the church. Like for many of us, my spiritual journey was disconnected from my journey as a student, as an immigrant, and all the other experiences that define me. During my time away from the church, I was undocumented. Some people call us dreamers. We live in the shadows of society, fully visible to others, yet fully anonymous to the state. As we reflect on the immigrant experience this month, we can recall a time when the members of the early church were people who lived in the shadows. The members of the early church were people without citizenship, privilege, or power in the mighty Roman Empire. In fact, Jesus Christ himself was not a citizen of the Roman Empire. However, plenty of people at the time heard the message of Christ and used their privilege to spread his message. The most notorious missionary is my personal favorite, Paul the Apostle. Today, the church stands on a 2,000-year-old mission to bring the message of Christ to all those living in the shadows, regardless of citizenship status. We live in a world similar in many ways to the world of the Romans, which is why the Gospels speak to us across the centuries. The missionary work of Paul the Apostle had implications at a personal level. Even though I felt embarrassed of being undocumented, Paul reminded me that God loved me for my humanity and not my status in society. Rather than seeking status, God calls us to seek connection with others. So I made a bold decision. I focused on connecting with others through social activism while leaving my immigration status in the hands of God. Once again, there was biblical precedent for trusting God's process, this time in Matthew 6:33, which reads, "But seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you." The kingdom of God is not a secular state. We are the kingdom of God. It is a truly remarkable dimension where the only requirement to join is to have faith in God, and all are welcome to find the presence of God by being present to each other. Jesus Christ was able to connect with so many souls, and we can follow his example. We are separated by time, but we are united by faith. I found the kingdom of God in my friendships, in my family, in my work, and oddly enough, in Victorian literature. Years passed, and there was no change in my immigration status. All the important change was happening within me as I began to merge my spiritual journey with all the other journeys that led me to activism, politics, college, and finally, St. Andrews. I held tight to the promise of Matthew 6:33. And earlier this year, I received my green card in the mail. I would not have been able to survive 12 years without a green card if it had not been for my faith and if I had not been part of the kingdom of God. All the seemingly disconnected paths we try to walk every day, from school to work to family, have direction. Our spiritual journey is not divorced from these paths because it is a compass that gives us direction. God is directing us to his kingdom, to a place greater than ourselves that only makes sense in the context of community. As we conclude the month of May, let us remember the early church so we can remember and learn from Jesus Christ and Paul the Apostle how to be present to the experiences of others. Let us also remember the promise of the kingdom of God. As people of faith, we cannot change someone's immigration status, but we can offer them something greater, a place in the kingdom of God. Thank you, and God bless you.